One of the most polarizing figures in this year's NFL draft is Baker Mayfield. His straightforward and in-your-face personality could be his greatest strength, but yet his greatest weakness. So the question becomes, how does this brash, emotional leader fit into this year's NFL draft puzzle? And how should we view his legacy as the Sooners quarterback? For some answers, I turn to Cody Stavenhagen, a Sooners beat writer for the Tulsa World, who joined me on Monday to provide some insight. So first of all, Cody, we want to take the time and welcome you to the Two Man Advantage podcast, and we're excited to have you on the show this afternoon, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into sort of Baker Mayfield's trajectory, I'm just wondering, we're starting you off by asking you, what do you think his defining moment will be at Oklahoma?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the moment that's most going to resonate with fans was probably beating Ohio State and planting that flag at midfield in Columbus. That was kind of what set the tone for his run to the Heisman Trophy. Obviously, one of his signature wins, won the road that set up OU's run to the Rose Bowl. Baker Mayfield had a lot of great moments, but I think the way he played in the second half of that game, and then, of course, his theatrics after the game really resonated with Oklahoma fans and kind of encompassed that emotion that Baker Mayfield became known for and very much the reason he was a fan favorite. And I think just beyond that, kind of the thing that really defines his time at OU is just his journey. The fact that this is a guy who wasn't heavily recruited out of high school, who walked on at Texas Tech and then transferred, basically made up his mind he was going to go play at the University of Oklahoma, despite the fact Trevor Knight was coming off a huge game beating Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Baker Mayfield wasn't afraid to go to OU, and he showed up unannounced. He didn't have a scholarship, and he contended for the job, and sure enough, he won it. So I think his other defining moment probably came before he ever stepped on the field, just the fact that he had the level of ambition and confidence and drive to go to a place like OU and compete for the job and win it. And then 3 years later, he's a Heisman Trophy winner and is going to be a first-round draft pick.
With his time in Norman now done, I'm wondering how you believe his legacy will be viewed at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, this is a school with a lot of great players, and Baker Mayfield goes down as arguably, maybe the best quarterback in the school. The only thing he doesn't have is that national title, which a guy like Josh Heupel has. But Sam Bradford played in a national title game and has a Heisman Trophy. Jason White, same thing. Baker Mayfield is right up there when you consider his body of work. I mean, he's one of the best players in OU history, one of the best offensive players, especially statistically in Big 12 history, and he's a college football great. And he, like I mentioned earlier, he really resonated with the fan base. Baker Mayfield was a beloved player among OU fans just for kind of the way he played the game. The reason a lot of other fans hate Baker Mayfield, the reason maybe people in the NFL have questions about him, are some of the same reasons he's loved in Norman, Oklahoma. This is a guy who wasn't afraid to wear his emotions on his sleeve at times, who wasn't afraid to be expressive and make football look like a lot of fun, and so that created fun game day atmospheres in Norman and across the Big 12, and so that's a big part of his legacy too, and again, why he will be remembered up there with anyone at one of the most storied programs in the history of college football.
Now, when we looked at his NFL trajectory, you kind of mentioned it in your last answer, but can you tell me about, I know Baker Mayfield sort of plays with a chip on his shoulder and he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he sort of has a straightforward personality. He kind of tells you what he's thinking in the moment without a filter. So I'm just wondering how you believe that personality will translate to the NFL.
Yeah, it's such a fine line because that attitude and that style is very much what makes Baker Mayfield great. Like I said, a guy who wasn't recruited out of high school, a guy who isn't blessed with unreal natural athletic ability, who isn't the tallest guy. He's good because he bets on himself himself all the time, and he has that level of confidence. That worked for him in college. Created a little bit of controversy, but overall it worked for him. Some things were probably overblown. But I think NFL scouts and GMs realize that pro football is a different world, and that's something I think Baker Mayfield will have to live with and come to understand, too, if he wants to be a successful starting quarterback, if he wants to be the face of an NFL franchise. You're called upon to be a lot more than just a quarterback. You have to be a team leader. You have to be professional. You have to carry yourself with a certain level of maturity day in, day out, on the field and off the field, in the weight room, in the locker room. One thing that I don't know that everyone realizes is that Baker Mayfield isn't Johnny Manziel, and that there are a lot of talks about Johnny Manziel wasn't a guy who was dedicated to the craft of football, and Baker Mayfield absolutely is. I mean, the guy spends a ton of time in the film room, in the weight room, on the field, perfecting his craft. And Bob Stoops at Oklahoma said Baker Mayfield worked as hard as anyone he's ever had. So I think that gives him an edge, but does he have to clean up some of the rough edges? Does he have to mature in order to be an NFL starting quarterback? Absolutely. And in a draft where there are a lot of good quarterbacks, could that sway NFL GMs to take another guy ahead of Baker Mayfield? I certainly understand that thought without any doubt.
Now, with his emotional makeup, do you think that that will play to his advantage when he tries to lead an NFL huddle once he gets into the spotlight there at the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question, and another tricky one. There's a line. I think veteran teammates want to see confidence from a young quarterback, so if he comes in as a rookie or his second year, I think they'll like that he'll be able to command himself like that. But at the same time, he kind of has to know his place, and life in the NFL is going to be difficult at times for him, I'm sure. I mean, it is for any quarterback, even the greats. So how are you going to respond to adversity? How can you channel those emotions, stay level-headed, and make great plays? That's another thing Baker Mayfield did very well at the college level that people probably don't give him credit for. There's kind of this image of him as a gunslinger and a scrambler, but he was a great decision-maker, was great from the pocket, under pressure. And so in college, he was able to harness those emotions and not allow them to dictate his play. He has to be able to do the same at the NFL level. And then again, he has to earn the respect of his teammates. And I think you do that through being confident, but there's a line. Can you overstep? What happens if you call out a veteran lineman, a veteran receiver? How are they going to take it? I think to a certain extent, Baker Mayfield probably needs to tone himself down a little bit, but he can't lose the essence that makes him Baker Mayfield, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough thing to do, and I'm glad Baker Mayfield's the one who has to figure out that line instead of me, because it won't be an easy thing. But overall, I mean, I think it probably, if I had to choose one way or another, I think it probably works to his advantage, just because the NFL is a league of alpha males, and Baker Mayfield sees himself in that mold, and if he can continue that and continue to have that attitude, it could set him up for success.
Now, with the NFL adopting some college principles now, and the offense that Baker played in college, do you think that may be an advantage for him? And what do you consider his best athletic trait?
Yeah, that's another good question. Even as the NFL has evolved, we still don't have a great example of a guy from a spread offense like the one Baker Mayfield played in truly succeeding, or at least being a dominant quarterback in the NFL. I think there are a lot of things that work into Baker Mayfield's advantage. I think a lot of things you see, I think Russell Wilson is maybe as good of a comparison as there is. A lot of things Seattle's offense does can at times represent a college scheme a little more, so I think that's good. The one thing that makes me think Baker Mayfield can make a transition to a more pro-style system goes back to his best athletic trait. It's his accuracy as a passer. It's tough to question his arm. He probably has about average arm strength, but I think he's going to have above average accuracy even in the NFL. There were points in this guy's college career where the ball was just on the money every time, put it where only his receiver could get it, was able to hit receivers in stride, was able to make a wide variety of different throws. And I think if he can do that, that makes the adjustment to the NFL much easier.
And my final question for you is, Where do you see Baker being drafted within this class of quarterbacks, and what do you think his ceiling or possible potential will be at the next level?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly where he's going to be drafted, but it seems like the New York Jets like him quite a bit, that could be a very good landing spot. I think he could possibly be a great fit in Denver as well. It just depends what team really decides that, hey, Baker Mayfield is going to be our guy, and I think those are two teams that seem like they could be ideal landing spots. His ceiling, again, it's tough to say. I think his ceiling is probably a little bit of a Russell Wilson. He's not quite as fast and athletic as Russell Wilson, but a shorter quarterback who's a very accurate passer, a good leader, is going to be able to be an all-pro level quarterback and lead a winning team. I think that's probably his ceiling. That doesn't necessarily mean he'll get there. I think another comparison is a Colt McCoy, a guy who could have a long lifespan in the NFL, but maybe never really becomes an established starter. Baker Mayfield might land somewhere between those two ranges, if I had to guess.
Hey, Cody, we want to take a few minutes and thank you for your insight on the future NFL career of Baker Mayfield. We really enjoyed your insight and want to thank you for your time this afternoon, buddy.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much, Kevin.